Hey there, rulers. DMO73 here with a pretty fun feature match today, featuring myself on a Lumia Puss in Boots Turbo Fog build versus Azure and an interesting take on Little Red plus Seer of the Blue Moon I'd call Moonburn. Let's go ahead and jump right in.
Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product,
The Ruler School Circuit Series now offering our Quarter 2 2024 circuit kits,
and our guest lecturer members, Bite Ramen. Class is in session.
So we are jumping right into this. Azure's on the left, like I said. We have a K1 Moonburn. It does have access to the Wolves. It is playing that package because Little Red and Wolfstone, but it is playing a very, very different build idea. And then Turbo Fog on the right is making use of the two best stun cards to come out of Pilgrim Memories, specifically Richelieu and the Deer, to make it so we're just not going to be taking damage for quite some time to be able to set up for things like Lumia's Rage. Azure going right in here off the top, going in for a Fleeting Moon Jewel. This is going to cheat in a free moon. We're certainly going to take some damage from the Little Red this turn. In comes Crimson Moon, which is going to go help search for the Wolf to set up for it next turn. It'll still be a strong Wolf even if we don't hit a Wolf Stone. And this Little Red is going to be hitting for quite a bit. It's going to be 1600 damage right out the jump, which is a lot for sure, but the Turbo Fog deck does have the ability to kind of gain some life back, which is very, very helpful. We kind of are doing some shortcutting here just for the sake of kind of helping set stuff up. Azure is just going to go ahead and swing in for 16. We're going to take it. Azure then using Fleeting Moon Jewel and the other moon to produce a moon, to then set a card in the standby area, very clearly setting us up for probably the K3 stealth card, which is a pretty cool little setup there with the moons. We're going in for a one for all for one. This is the kind of setup to be able to help make it so we're just not going to take aggro damage, which is nice. Getting a Richelieu and an Athos. This sets us up for next turn. We're burning coin for this so that we can use Moonshade to pay red to put into play the Richelieu. This is also nice because one for all for one gives our Musketeers the ability to have barrier, which is really good, so that we don't have to worry about Little Red popping them, which sets us up, which is helpful because of the, trials. So we don't want to give Azure any value that we can. For down comes that Wolfstone, so we can see another flip this turn. We do see a Judgment, and at this point in time, in response to Judgment, so we can get some good value, we're going to try to gain a little bit extra life with Lumia, and then pay 2 and flash in the Richelieu. Now, the reason why we're doing this on recovery is because Little Red has to target something if able, and so it'll have to target the Richelieu, which will kill it, and then get us an extra card. So this is helpful for us. Athos then gets to go in and get us the Milady de Winter, so that we have this kind of 12-12 body, and it also makes it so that Little Red just can't attack. Richelieu says until the end of the next turn, until the end of my next turn, non-musketeers can't attack. So it just means that Crimson Wolf's not going to do anything. It means that Little Red can't swing. It's a really nice way to just say, look, you're being very aggressive. I don't want to deal with it. So something really cool to kind of make note of. And it puts us out a 12-12 body, so we'll be able to start putting some aggression out too. A 12-12 barrier blocker is also really nice, especially if we can get to, when those wolves start coming down, it's nice to be able to have something that can maybe be just bigger than those wolves based on number of moons. We'll see how it goes. Right now, a wolf coming in to play will be a little bit bigger now that we see a Game of Lies. Not unexpected to see it in this build, particularly because it's also playing, this kind of burn package. So Game of Lies makes First Lie suddenly. We have the ability to play First Lie off of this really easily. We can use Fleeting Moon Jewel and Crimson Moon plus the Amadeus Stone to play First Lie, which can recharge our hand. And underneath a Game of Lies, it means that we can just still also make me kind of, if I go the higher card or the lower card, lose a lot of life, which is something to kind of take note of. Knowing that we can't swing, the Little Red is probably just going to flip back down. It's just a matter of if Azure wants to spend that additional will or leave up to be able to play First Lie on the following turn. So we'll see how things go there. This is really the interesting point. Looking at the K3 or the Kaguya resonator that's face down, it has to be able to target another resonator to be able to get its effect that it has in play. So right now there's only one resonator on the field and it has barrier, so that won't be able to work right now. So again, probably going to be a matter of just passing the turn and leaving up Will for being able to play Game of Lies to recharge. First Lie to be able to recharge or potentially do some burn damage to me, which one thing to note is that the Turbo Fog deck is really good at stopping damage, right? But the issue that will be present is that we're going to be dealing with life loss, which is a little bit different. There's not really many ways to prevent that right now. Off the top, we hit the Pure Heartstone, which is going to set us up for Almeria, so now we can start to think about getting Lumia into play next turn. Lumia sitting there being ready to gain us some life here. Probably just going to maybe swing in for 12 here. We'll see. This makes me think that I probably have another Richelieu in hand at this point in time. Swinging in for 12. I eventually have to kill. It is very large. There's nothing really much that Azure will have to be able to block that, so down to 28. That point in time, look, I think I do see another Richelieu there using the moons as we expected. Down comes that First Lie. We're going to probably respond to that, paying 100 to go ahead and do a Fossil Girl here to pop the First Lie or the Game of Lies in response. Main reason to do this is so that Game of Lies doesn't have that additional text, and so when it resolves, and so at that point in time I can choose a low number and risk not losing any life even regardless. At that point in time, if Game of Lies is out, there's really no reason to not call like 5, because you're going to lose 5 life anyway. It kind of shifts where the base minimum stone is, or base minimum resource here is. We go ahead and go in. I declared 0, Azure declared 5, so Azure's going to lose 500 life and draw the 3 cards. Doesn't get to draw the extra card because of Game of Lies, so really fills up the hand, but puts us at a really interesting life total together. Keep in mind that I do still have the ability to gain 300 life off of the Lumia. And then before recovery here, knowing that we're playing against a potential control deck, we're going to go ahead and put in another Richelieu while we're tapped out here. This is mainly just to set up so that there isn't going to be anything swinging at my Athos to set up for Seer of the Blue Moon. We do not want Trials to be able to get added value. Now keep in mind, this does mean that Richelieu is going to be able to be recovered, but that's kind of a null point here, so it's not a huge issue that it has that extra swing, because it won't be able to swing. It'll just be a body on board. I am kind of giving Azure a body to be able to start using with the Kaguya ability though, so that's something to keep in mind too. And I am fully tapped out, other than potentially cards in my hand. Who knows if I'm playing some of the Brad spells. Maybe probably am as a Lumia deck. So Calling Stone, we know that's going to be a Wolf Stone. That's going to come into play. We probably aren't going to see a little red flip this turn, because again, it'll set up to kill the Richelieu, although we might see something like play Crimson Wolf, and then, although right now Crimson Wolf will be too big, so we could see a Crimson Wolf play Immortal Little Moon. Double Immortal Little Moon is certainly a way to also deal some damage. Just do 1200 to me, and then we'll gain 300 thanks to Lumia here. A lot of moons coming out here, so now Crimson Wolf is certainly going to be too big for Little Red to go, but ultimately just choosing to pass the turn, asking if we're going to cycle the Wolfstone. Going into my turn, move to recovery. We're at a point now where we could potentially swing in for some good amount of value here, but it's just a question of what's going to happen. So Calling Stone with that, setting up for potential Lumia flip. It's a little bit weird to flip Lumia now, simply because I haven't set up value with things like Sword of Progression or anything else, and I don't have like a Lumia's Rage. And the other thing here again is, because Azure is playing Trials, we don't want to give too many things to be able to target, because we don't want to just get free treasury items getting produced by just being able to kill things. So we're going to swing in for 12. Azure says that is fine, I'm going to take it. So that's really nice for us. Got a pretty interesting grip of cards here, not a ton of value to be had, but we can still put ourselves in a pretty interesting position. Nothing can attack this turn that isn't a Musketeer, so that's also something to kind of keep in mind of here. We're going to swing in for 8. goes to block. In response to the draw trigger off of the Richelieu, we do see Azure pay to do Roamer to try to make me lose 400 life for every card that I draw this turn. That's going to see us have some kind of response, which is interesting here to try to set up, because again, we don't want to die. We're going to go ahead and pay 100. We're going to see a Sword of Progression come down here to try to just cycle and draw a card and set up the next, Sword of Progression off of a potential Lumia here. And then still in response to the Roamer activation, we're going to go ahead and do what I think is a pretty cute little play line here. Trying to gain some life so that we don't, at okay life totals, that we don't just immediately die to potential double moon or something like that in the next turn. Also being able to set up something like Deer to stop damage, or be able to survive through a Game of Lies or something like that. We're going to do Light Curtain, targeting our own Musketeer, the 8/8. So we will be able to gain 800 life and go up to 2,000, and then draw the card and go back down to 16, which means with Lumia we'll be at 19, which is really nice. So kind of double tracking, the two of us kind of checking exactly like what life totals is here, kind of having a discussion. The Richelieus get to come back into my hand, which is very, very nice, because the Musketeer I control was destroyed. That sets us up for, if we had another Athos in hand, that'd be pretty good here, because we could set up another turn. And oh, if you look at that, I do have another Athos in hand. That's pretty solid. A Lady de Winter being in there is not great. The Roamer then resolves. We get to draw another card. We'll lose the 400, and then we'll just kind of pass the turn and drawing into Deer. So this is really, really decent setup. So I'm at a good point to be able to go to 1900 life. I've got Deer to be able to potentially stop any burn damage that's coming into my face, provided that Azure commits something to board. And I've got a Richelieu to be able to make it so stuff can't attack. So overall, pretty decent. The inherent risk of Deer is that it does put on something on board that Azure could potentially burn and get extra value off of on trials. The ultimate thing, though, is with this particular deck, that's probably fine, because if it can't do any damage to me, extra value isn't going to necessarily generate anything immediately that I can't respond to, or doesn't help kind of really contribute to the game plan. So being able to set up a potential Deer plus a Richelieu is really good here, keeping in mind that if there is a body put on board, we can go... we can't put Deer into the field after Richelieu, but we can Richelieu and then Deer. So it's a matter of, we need the mana access here. Azure starts to go into the Kaguya card. We'll cycle this here in a second, because Azure then realizes, oh wait, I need to have another body on field. So we kind of do a little bit of a rewind, which is fine. Still have the floating. Use the blue for Servant. Servant is then going to get to kind of recycle. Interestingly enough, gets to recycle the Fleeting Moon Jewel that was just used to produce the Will for Servant. So it's a cute little cycle. But we're okay with this because it puts another body on board, and we're kind of waiting until... we get some value off of the Deer, most likely. So Game of Lies comes in off of the Fleeting Moon Jewel. Remember, we still have a Floating Void at this at this moment. The Game of Lies is pretty bad here, but it does only represent 500 life loss off of a single First Lie, which does cost 2 will, or at this point in time, tapping Fleeting Moon Jewel and something else. So based on the number of... we do have a Void floating, though, so there is a world where we see double Game of First Lie come down this turn. It's just a matter of what Azure has in hand. Checking how much will we have left here, double checking that we have exactly 1 Void floating here, kind of tracking where the stones are. We do see the Kaguya come down. In response to the Kaguya enter effect is probably when we're going to see Deer come in, paying 1 to set up for Guardian Beast of the Light Palace. I just do not want to take burn damage from any moons right now. That is the biggest kind of concern that I have about this particular moment. And 1,000 defense is kind of hard for Azure to deal with necessarily. There's not a lot of stuff, with Little Red only being able to do 8. The hand has to be pretty specific for Guardian Beast to be able to get popped here. So, but again, as we said before, I have Richelieu on backup, and I don't want to take, like, generating extra value with the treasuries is not a huge issue for me right now, because I just don't want to take burn damage. And so I want to survive for another turn. You know, if I can set up to be at even with Game of Lies out on the field, that'll be double. First lie would be 500 life loss, so I would be at 900 life, be able to go into my turn. I could give the Athos flying, and then we just swing for lethal. So we're at a pretty decent spot here, especially considering the fact that Athos is probably not going to get killed this turn. Well, I guess there's a world where Athos gets killed this turn, but it seems like I probably have some kind of response. So discarding a card, discarding Wolf to be able to get a treasury item into the field. There's a little bit of a misconception here. I accidentally say that Kaguya brings the treasury to hand. That is not correct. It does put it straight into the field. So a little bit of a Jeremy can't read cards moment here, just in keep in mind. That's the treasury item we're getting off the deck. We do see a flip. It's going to ping the deer for 800. And then the question is, do we have some other way to deal an additional bit of damage to the deer? This little red is very, very large right now. Crimson Moon is giving plus buffs for a bunch of different stuff. We do see another immortal little moon come down. Like I said, there was burn damage in hand. It's going to finish off the deer. That's going to proc trials, which is probably going to go get a scroll for just more draw power. But again, we're under a board state where we can do Richelieu, so we don't have to worry about damage from that, like swinging here. It really comes down to what Azure's going to do here. Azure moves to combat and goes at face, which is a misplay here, because of the fact that as big as it is, we're like, okay, sure, you're swinging face, that's fine. There's a lot of moons. Declare no blocks. We're going to let it happen and take no damage because of deer. So a little bit of a misplay there. Ultimately, that feeds into I probably should have flashed in the Richelieu in advance anyway, just to make sure that it couldn't swing at the Athos. So a little bit of an error on my part there, just to be safe. We are going to see some cycling. Even more cycling with the Fleeting Moon Jewel. We have an additional blue and 2 void floating at this point. The blue is going to be used to cast Servant, which is going to buy back the Fleeting Moon Jewel. It is a moon getting put into play. Crimson Wolf only gets cheated when a fire moon comes into play, but keeping in mind the fact that there was a fire moon put into play in the form of the thing, now comes down the Richelieu. So we're like, you have a bajillion things on board. There's a Richelieu. We're going to go ahead and just make it so that that Crimson Wolf can't now try to attack my Athos and get more value out of it, which feels pretty good for us. Again, there's still 2 void floating at this point, keeping that in mind. So there's a very real opportunity that we could see Fleeting Moon Jewel get recast down to 1400, can go back up to 1700 life. Really just a matter of kind of trying to make sure that my Athos survives here, because Athos is how I'm going to win on the crackback, because Azure's at so low life. At this point in time, Game of Lies can't even kill me, which is really, really good. And so that pretty much locks us in because of the Richelieu, making it so that Athos gets to live. One for all and all for one, doing a great job here in preventing our stuff from being targeted. So a million bajillion moons currently in play. The Kaguya has to go face down, gets to buy. At the end of the turn, we're going to cycle, put a moon back, and draw a card. The other one's not going to get to do that. And then we pass turn. Wolf flips back over. So wondering if we're going to cycle the Wolf Stone. Of course, we're going to cycle the Wolf Stone. That's how we're going to try to keep bringing the Wolf back. Draw for turn. Before recovery, we're going to try to gain 300 life. Seeing if there might be a response to that. Says that's fine, you can gain it back. We're also going to use the One for All ability here, which is wrong. So keep in mind that this One for All ability to be able to reanimate the Athos is only usable during main timing. Again, Jeremy, read your cards, please. It doesn't ultimately matter though, because we have the Almeria Stone and there's no flyers on Azure's side of the board. So we can just use Almerius to give the Athos with 1200 attack flying and fly in to finish off that last 100 life and close out the game. So we do some kind of like, let's go through his here. We could also just keep in mind that we could reanimate the Athos just during main timing, because the One for all for one big stat buff to the Athos, it doesn't require you to tap One for all and all for one. It just requires you to rest the other musketeers. So we could still like make this Athos huge. It would be a grand total of 2800 damage. But we don't really need to do that. We just pay 100 and we give the Athos flying, and then we say, let's try to go in to find our lethal line here, double checking to make sure you don't have any flyers, and then we'll just go in for the lethal that way. We're going to pay 200 life to try to perform judgment and hold priority with that to go ahead, just to set up to make sure with only one will available for Azure. We're going to just make sure we're going to hold priority after putting judgment on Chase to attempt to use Lumia's ability to gain 300 life. Keeping in mind this doesn't come up very often, so that's what's being discussed right now. The way it works with a ruler that has a tap ability is you can put judgment on the Chase, hold priority, use their tap ability, and they will successfully still be able to judgment. They just come into play into the field rested. This is not a big deal for me. It's mainly just to set up for the fact that I know I have a sort of progression in the RFG that will serve as a cancel, so that then sets me up to be able to have one will to be able to interact through whatever Azure might pull with one will on their side of the field to protect this Athos, so that we can try to go in for a lethal line. We do see the first lie come down here just to try to draw into something in response. So I still haven't gained the life at this point in time. We're going to say, cool, we're going to call a number. Game of Lies is up, so he gets to draw, or they get to draw 4 cards, and I lose 500 life because I chose the lower number, and that's how Game of Lies modifies the first lie's text, which is fine. But now Azure's fully tapped out, so I gain 300 life, go back up to 1200, and then I can swing in the air for the 1200 to scoop up game 1. Thankfully, just outside of Chivalry's Tears range, even with the Game of Lies there. So going into game 2, we are on the play. We're going to see that turn 1 Pure Heartstone to set up Almerius for turn 2. And then we are going to kind of take a risk knowing the deck that we're playing against here and go for the one for all for one just to set it up. We know that Azure is not playing the like Magic Stone Dance of Chaos kind of shenanigans, so even though Azure's on the coin, the likelihood that this is going to result in more than like 1600 damage is pretty low, especially if we don't see a Wolfstone, which we didn't. So took a little bit of a risk here going for the one for all for one, but it does set me up for future turns to just be at like maximum value and be able to kind of respond as according. So Azure ultimately just saying pass turn. We're going to try to draw 3. In response, we're going to get Metal Lifeform Dragoned. So we're going to gain 3, and then we have 7 cards in hand, so we take 14. So we go down to 28, essentially, which is a pretty good chunk of damage, but also for us it's kind of fine because like now we get to worry about Azure being with only 2 will. We have 2 will, we have Lumia for life gain, we've got a full grip of cards, we've got Richelieu in hand. Like this feels like a pretty decent setup for us to be able to play into something and keep ourselves alive here. Getting that extra will off of the Kaguya deck is really nice. And again, one for all for one, putting in some serious work, making it so our stuff can't get targeted. Second stone, no Moonstone, Amadeus Holy Crystal. We really like this. This feels really great. We want to make sure that moons come in as late as possible because we want to be able to save our burn stuff or like our like protection stuff here for later. We know that that stone is red. The little red stone has been called as red. Down comes the Fleeting Moon Jewel. Does Crimson Moon comes into play, that's going to get to go search for a wolf. I imagine we will probably see a Richelieu come down here to try to serve as protection, potentially, but we'll see exactly how this works. We could do the same thing where we set up a Richelieu, doing a little bit of shortcutting as Azure goes to go for light flip. We see, we kind of shortcut it here. Azure said they were going to judgment and then try to go in for an attack here, trying to use Light Curtain. So we're going to try to kill the wolf and remove its imperishable, even though it has imperishable thanks to Crimson Moon. Trying to kill it and just make it so that it's not a threat anymore for the rest of the game, which puts us in a position where we can Judgment Lumia probably this next turn and get a lot of value, especially off of the Aslan. Azure choosing to use Godly Aura to kill the little red before Light Curtain kills it so that the imperishable doesn't go away. This is a really clutch line. I've used it myself as a player playing Abdul to try to kill Abdul before they kill it. you know, while it still has imperishable or something like that. It's a really clever line. Thankfully, there is some follow-up here using the Fleeting Moon Jewel and the Moon to play another Crimson Moon. So now Wolf, the next time it comes into play, is going to be even bigger. Little Red's going to be even bigger. But again, we're set up for being able to do Richelieu plays, which is really nice. And we have the Aslan in the RFG, which is nice for if we do flip over the Lumia. So paying 100 here before recovery, we're going to go ahead and use Fossil Girl in the City to pop one of the Crimson Moons, because we don't want that much buff. Arguably, we probably should have popped the Fleeting Moon Jewel, but there's a world where we don't want to let Azure be able to recycle it easily. It's kind of a toss-up here. Getting rid of the Crimson Moons is how we get rid of the Imperishable, which is ultimately what we really want to be trying to do, so that once we kill the Little Red, we can just kind of flip without worrying about our stuff being shot a bunch. So we kind of minimize the main way that Trials is going to generate value, and we get ourselves into a pretty decent position. We can't put Aslans into play while Little Red can flip, because it's just a free target for Azure to be able to shoot with the Little Red Judgment, and we don't like that. So we're going to play a little bit cautious here. We're going to just call Stone, pass, go back to Azure. Azure still not hitting Wolfstone, but Lone Wolf still gets to do some good stuff here. We're going to go in and get the Richelieu. That's going to get us the Athos here, which is then going to get us the Milady de Winter. Arguably, there's a world where we probably should have waited until that combat was declared, so that we could try to block the Wolf. But ultimately, it's also kind of nice for us to let Azure have things on board. The main reason is because that sets us up for cheaper deers. So overall, it works out in our favor. And if Azure wants to flip here, it'll kill the Wolf, which might proc and get another Fire Moon off the top, or just another Moon in general. But we'll see. Does use those Void with Fleeting Moon Jewel to put a card into standby. But or could flip the Little Red to kill the Richelieu, but still not hitting Wolfstone at this point is pretty interesting. Before recovery, we're probably going to see another life gain here, go up to 32. If there's any other plays before recovery, ultimately not. There is a world where we cast, with this particular situation, there's a world where we could cast Shiva here. We aren't able to put wind resonators into the field with Richelieu. So there's a world where we cast Shiva here to put another Eternal Blocker onto the board, kill the Wolf, and make our Athos bigger. Ultimately, though, Azure says, you know what, I'm going to take the purest damage. I'm going to block with this Wolf. It only has 600 damage. We're going to proc and see what the top value is. See if we get a Moon Edition. We do not. We have a Treasury Keeper. It does count as a Moon, but it has to be a Moon Edition to be put into the field. So we know what the top deck is for Azure, leaving 4 stones open for us, and we're just going to pass, leaving up a massive amount of interaction going on here. End of the turn, we're going to go ahead and see that Kaguya come in, able to target the Richelieu. We did give a Richelieu to Azure, so Azure's going to be able to discard a card. It's a Wolf, which will then be able to generate a free treasury item into the field. Fleeting Moon Jewel already being in the field, Azure doesn't have as much value off of that. It could go grab Pictorial Scroll from the EX deck and draw some cards, but that might not be what Azure wants to do right now. Tries to get maybe aggressive. Does choose to grab Jewel from Gear's neck. Jewel on a Gear's neck, which will serve as an extra body. Because there's enough treasury items on field eventually, we are going to go ahead and shuffle the deck, because we did peek through the deck, so we don't know what the top deck is here. So at this point in time, Deer, it only costs us 1, which is really nice. We'll see what happens there. We're using the Little Red to pump up the Richelieu. It's a 6/6 Richelieu for the turn. Does mean that Richelieu would be able to, with the Little Red, be able to swing into the Athos, which would proc, which is interesting value-wise. Let's see if that comes up. Calling Stones, still no Wolfstone. So those double Wolves in graveyard just truly not getting to come back anytime soon, unless we see something get played to bring them into the field. like a burn moon or the discard to pump moon. Both very good options for this deck, but not getting it naturally. So swinging in with the Richelieu, deciding whether or not we want to respond to that. Saying, you know what? I don't think we can afford to let that guy take that damage right now. We're going to make you put in a little bit more work. We're going to send in a flashing smile. Drawing a card gets to kill both the Richelieu and the Kaguya, which will then draw us another card because Richelieu was destroyed. So keeping our hand very full, which is very important because the Azure's deck will be able to get some good stuff. Immortal Little Moon gets to reanimate those wolves because it burns me for 6, takes us down to 31. Little Red also being able to attack this turn, and both of these wolves potentially able to swing into Athos. They are both currently sitting at 800s because there are 3 moons, so it would take both of them to kill the Athos, but it seems probably like that's fine for Azure. So we do see a swing in for 1. We see that is fine. 800 damage. That gets to happen. Reveal that top. It's a Roamer of the Crimson Moon. So Azure with only 1 card in hand. This is a pretty decent position for us. Swings in with the other wolf. We're going to go ahead and flash in the Wings of Light and Darkness to RFG that wolf, keeping our Athos alive. Does mean, though, we are probably going to see Little Red just suicide into the Athos to try to kill it. If there's some kind of response here, otherwise we might just accept that it's the trade. This is a missed trigger on my side. Richelieu just gets to come back to hand. This is a missed trigger. Milady de Winter should be animated onto Azure's side as a Resonator. That is a mistake on my part here. Kaguya's Pictorial Scroll getting to come in here. We know one of those 3 cards is a Roamer. One of the cards also being a Immortal Little Moon, which gets to ping me for another 6, which then will successfully reanimate the Wolf from Graveyard, which is now swinging in for 1,000. And you say, you know what? We're going to take it. We're going to take the 1,000 damage. Takes us down to 700. Attempts to animate the Jewel on a dragon's neck, on a gear's neck. And we say, okay, listen, this is a lot. We're going to go ahead and flash in the deer here. We'll go down to 500. Very, very risky, knowing that we could respond to another moon to burn us for 6 by just gaining 300 life to say no. Guardian Beast is going to say no damage. We don't want to take it. And then we'll pass the turn there. 1 card still in hand from Azure. 2 cards face down because of the Pictorial Scroll. Paying 100 to play Keeper of the Treasury items. Gets to look at top 3, seeing if there's a treasury item or a moon into them. Getting the Crimson Moon, which is really good. Does not have Mythic, so we're going to get some good value here. Fleeting Moon Jewel, producing Moon and Void. Going to then cast Crimson Moon with the Void, which then lets us search for something. There's a very real world where you just search for Roamer here to set up a potential next turn double Roamer, and just tell me that I die, which is real. The problem there is that unless there's also a Roamer in hand, you set yourself up for a position where I'll draw a card, I'll gain some life. There's a after recovery, I can gain life again. You've committed a ton of stuff to board, and then I can just play Shiva and set myself up that way. So gaining life here, trying to go up to that life before recovery. We're going to see a pitch of a Roamer. So we gain 3, lose 4, call Stone, hit the another Moonshade. We would have loved for that to be a Pure Heart Stone, so it only costs us 100 instead of 200. We're going to go ahead, try to do Judgment with Lumia. We're playing a little bit risky here, but mainly so that we have access to deer again. So flip Lumia, holding priority to gain 300 life. We're going to go up to 700. That's going to proc Aslan. Aslan's going to get reanimated. Again, this is a big risk. It gets to RFG 2 cards. We hit a Sword of Progression and another deer. We're going to then use those 2 cards to then cast another Aslan. That Aslan is then going to remove another 2. We hit a thing and another Aslan. We're going to play even riskier. We're going to put a third Aslan into the field just to kind of recycle. None of these cards are ones that I want to hit off of Lumia. We'd be loving to hit something like a Light Curtain. That'd be pretty solid. Using Lumia, hold priority as those 2 cards are face down to let me RFG 3 with Lumia, and then Aslan's going to hit another 2. We hit a Lumia's Rage, and I believe a Fossil Girl. Neither one of those is particularly good, but we do have a deer in hand, so that's important to note. This is real risky. We're trying to keep Lumia alive. We're trying to make it so that we can't take damage. We would love to have Richelieu. We have a Richelieu in hand. We'd love to have an Athos. Paying 100 to go ahead and before recovery on before even draw for turn on Azure's turn, we're going to go ahead and pay 100, go down to 6 and flash in the deer just to say we don't want to take any damage this turn. We also don't want to take the Lumia to die. Knowing full well that we are not in a good spot life-wise. The Jewel on Dragon's Neck is going to get reanimated because we certainly have enough treasury items on field. And then we'll see how things go here. Lumia's probably, like, the beauty is, like, the Aslans are trying to block. The Aslans are probably going to try to block for the Lumia, which probably feels fine for us because at this point in time, Azure probably doesn't have a lot of good treasury items to grab with the way that the deck is designed. We noticed that most of these treasuries have been grabbed, have either been pictorial, have been either the Fleeting Moon Jewel from the deck or treasury items from the EX area. So these Aslans dying at this point don't super matter, especially because, you know, if I put another Lumia into play or something like that, I can just reanimate the Aslans and go again. Which is something to keep in mind. So in response to the Keeper of Treasury items getting cast, we're going to go ahead and say we don't want you digging any, so we're going to go ahead and risk our Lumia spell for the turn, play Kilo, a Fossil Girl in the city to try to cancel the enter. Ultimately, though, that puts us at only 400 life, which we completely forgot in this moment. There is a roamer face down. So it is a moon, the treasury item. They are a moon, but also Wolfstone, so it doesn't matter. Pings one of the Aslans, that procs trials. That's going to get some kind of treasury item, although it doesn't really matter. We see a Cowrie of Gears to draw from that. But ultimately, though, we know there's another roamer face down. So unless we top deck something insanely good here to be able to cancel the roamer draw trigger, this is going to be the game. Ultimately, it did end up working out that this match is a draw. This happened during time on these turns happened here during the end of match procedures on game 3 or game 2. So that is the match. Excellent game though, showed off really both decks. Deck lists for both lists will be up later this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.